there are clearly going to have to be a lot of resources. There's a lot of drain on public services, on taxpayer dollars by bringing people into the country. We have no idea who they are. We have no idea, what their skill set is or how they'll contribute right away and all the rest of it. They are overwhelmingly non-English speakers. I mean, some of them speak some English, but a lot of them speak basically no English. They're functionally incapable of communicating in English. And this is good for the country. Why? And if it's good for the country, which a lot of libs would say, of course it is, a lot of leftists, Clay, why doesn't the Democrat Congress start passing bills just saying we don't need to have any border whatsoever? Because we basically don't right now.
Good news. You guys may get tired of hearing me talk about it for the next 2 months, but you have so many people out there in the punditry that just kind of throw their finger up in the air and say, oh, I feel like this is going to happen, or I feel like that's going to happen. I love checking the gambling markets on all of these races. And in particular, we've had Kari Lake on this show, what do you think, 2-3 times? At least, Buck, over the last year, probably. And every time she comes on, when we finish the segment, I turn to Buck, or Buck turns to me. She's a stud. Like, legitimately an incredible communicator who we've been telling you, and a lot of you listening out in Arizona already know this, she's going to be elected governor. She is just way better of a candidate than her opponent. And I actually think that there's a decent chance that she is the vice presidential candidate in 2024. Now, I know she doesn't want to answer questions about this right now. It is a credit, because I saw her just lobotomize a reporter who asked that question. But it's a credit to her that the conversation in Arizona has already started to turn from, is she going to win, and to, man, how much higher could she climb? She may not want to be vice president. She may really legitimately want to be governor of Arizona for 2 terms, as she said, but I think she's going to do that. Early on, Buck, everybody out there was like, oh, Kari Lake's too controversial. She's too much of a pro-Trump person. There's no way she's going to win. This morning, as part of my prep, I went and I checked the latest markets, and Kari Lake, for the first time in her entire political campaign, is now favored to be the next governor of Arizona based on where people are putting their money in the gambling markets. And I think she's going to win comfortably. And, Buck, she may be able to win to such an extent. Blake Masters in a fight with, the astronaut Mark Kelly, who never has anything interesting to say. But she may win by enough that we're seeing the same thing that happens in Georgia. That's the only thing.
He's an astronaut. Hold on a second. That's
what
breaking
do you think
news.
About the border? Yeah, he's like, Mark Kelly gets asked, what do you think? What do you think about the border? Well, when I was an astronaut and I looked down at Earth, when I was in the spaceship, I was an astronaut in the space. It's all he's got to say.
Who was it that was the governor of Ohio who ran for, I'm forgetting his name.
Kasich,
the worst. And he would do this thing where he was just like, oh, my dad was a mailman. It's like, we know. We've heard the mailman thing a million times. We know. Mark Kelly, you're an astronaut. Congratulations.
I just love, it feels like every time Mark Kelly can answer any question, he can start it off by, when I was training to be an astronaut. Well, and you're like, hey, Mark Kelly, what do you think about crime in Phoenix? Well, when I was in Houston training to be an astronaut,
it's kind of like the propulsion system on the NASA 2 space glider. That's what. No, I don't know anything.
That is Mark Kelly's answer to everything. Kari Lake is going to win, and obviously everybody listening to us out in Arizona has to go vote. When I say that, I don't want people to be like, well, I don't need to go vote. So understand when I'm telling you what I believe is going to happen, it's predicated on people actually going out and voting. All right. So presume that you still need to do your job in Arizona, but she's the far better candidate. She's been calling out her opponent, and I think she's going to trounce that opponent. And I think she's going to win to such an extent, Buck, that Blake Masters is going to be able, in the same way that we're seeing Brian Kemp run a fabulous campaign against Stacey Abrams in Georgia, and Herschel Walker can kind of get alongside of him and run a wingman campaign because that governor's campaign is going so well. I'm seeing a symbiotic effect there going on also in Arizona, where I think Blake Masters is going to be lifted by being able to run as the wingman for Kari Lake, who is a phenomenal candidate. And one reason, Buck, why I think in Arizona in particular that Kari Lake is having a lot of success is Democrats are trying to pretend that the border is not a disaster. They're not even just trying to pretend. They're flat out lying to us about what is going on at the border.
Hold on a second, Clay, because Karine Jean-Pierre yesterday made it very clear that they're doing like a lot of stuff to make the border super secure. Do we have that from yesterday? We have Kari Lake. I know she said it.
We may need to grab that
Karine
audio.
Jean-Pierre said it. I'm saying Karine Jean-Pierre. Do we have her? We need to grab that audio if we don't have it. The reality here is the border is the worst it's ever been, and the numbers actually the same way with immigration. The same way with immigration, or with rather inflation. Immigration is a function of the numbers right now. You look at 5 million plus in 2 years. We have it? Here we go. Here is Karine Jean-Pierre yesterday.
We're certainly doing a lot more to secure the border.
No, they are not. I mean, they can say this. I know that was a quick soundbite. They are not doing a lot more to secure the border. I speak to people in Border Patrol. We've spoken to the former acting ICE director who knows the whole system. Clay, their version of securing the border, and I really mean this, is to surge more assets, more resources to the border to process comfortably and quickly the illegal immigrants who are coming into the country. They are lying about asylum claims. They are not showing up for their hearings. They are getting into a country that has been made very clear by the Biden regime there is no interest in doing interior enforcement. So this is why people show up at the border and say, I'm here because of Joe Biden. I'm here because I realize I can stay forever.
Remember, and we'll play a little bit longer cut of Karine Jean-Pierre disastrous response about the border yesterday. But I thought and continue to believe that one of the worst answers that Karine Jean-Pierre has ever given was when Peter Doocy called her out, Buck, and said, people are just walking across the border. And she laughed and said, people aren't walking across the border like a schoolgirl with no comprehension. And Doocy was like, no. You can watch it on television. They are literally walking across the border. That's how they get here. I mean, all you have to do is watch Fox News for 20 minutes any week, and there's easy footage of, hey, here's a huge caravan walking right across the border to turn itself in or potentially not even get stopped.
I've seen it. I mean, I've witnessed this with my own two eyes.
Seen it yourself.
And this continues, and the way that it works, it's not complicated. People show up at the border now, and they say if they've been coached by the cartels, which in many cases they have. Sometimes you'll even find
everyone now coming across the border is only allowed to come across the border because the cartels have completely taken over in Mexico.
They've
broken
down these areas into cartel control. They call them plazas. And it's for not just the human smuggling, obviously, but the drug smuggling, too, although the human smuggling is incredibly profitable for the cartels, billions and billions of dollars. They wear bracelets. I've seen the bracelets I've seen them on migrants, and then you see huge piles of them on the ground to show that they've paid the cartel price, and therefore they can come across the border. Because people say, well, why don't they just go on their own? Because the cartel finds you haven't paid the price. God knows what they're going to do to you. Their cartels are vicious, heinous criminal syndicates that will engage in the worst kinds of brutality. We all know that. So people pay this price. They show up at the border. They wave down Border Patrol, and they say, I'm here. I've got a credible fear. Or if they're a family unit, there's all these different categories they go into. But ultimately, Clay, because there's so many of them, the system is overwhelmed. So now they just release them. You have a notice to appear, or you give us your word you'll appear, whatever. It's just a flood. They cannot process the people coming into the country. There are 500,000 plus gotaways. The numbers are staggering. And the Biden administration just says, oh, yeah, no, we've got this. It's such a lie. And people need to understand. In New York City, you know what they're doing now? They're busing migrants down to Florida. That's their newest plan. That's what they're doing here in my hometown. And it goes to show you there are clearly going to have to be a lot of resources. There's a lot of drain on public services, on taxpayer dollars by bringing people into the country. We have no idea who they are. We have no idea, what their skill set is or how they'll contribute right away and all the rest of it. They are overwhelmingly non-English speakers. I mean, some of them speak some English, but a lot of them speak basically no English. They're functionally incapable of communicating in English. And this is good for the country. Why? And if it's good for the country, which a lot of libs would say, of course it is, a lot of leftists, Clay, why doesn't the Democrat Congress start passing bills just saying we don't need to have any border whatsoever? Because we basically don't right now.
Well, and Biden and Kamala, neither one have still been to the border, Buck. I mean, I know Biden's been to his beach house in Delaware for half his presidency, it feels like. He can take vacations all over the place, but it's a willful blindness that they will not acknowledge what is actually going on there. And it is such an abject failure that I think it's registering in a big way with Arizona. I think that's one reason Kari Lake has hammered this, that she is going to win in Arizona. And I think, astronaut Mark Kelly is going to get dunked on by Blake Masters because I think that he's unable to answer this question.
And I think the Democrats recognize that this is a vulnerability. Certainly in those races, it should play a massive role for independents and persuadables. Like, the loony left I can't speak to because they're loony, or I can speak to, but we're not going to change their minds. But what you see here is at a time when we're being told, what California's getting rid of gas-powered cars. It's going to be the law. We had businesses shut down. You had to mask up on planes because it's the law, which it actually really wasn't. It was a federal dictate. But the point is, all these different things. They're going to raise taxes on everybody, squeeze, hundreds of billions more with the Inflation Reduction Act passed now. Why don't the laws about immigration count? They point to the law with everything else. They want us to applaud throwing a former president in prison, perhaps, over document handling because it's the law. But 5 million illegals in the country? That's not the law? I mean, I just want to know what's the difference there. Explain that one to me, someone out there in Libland. The border is wide open, as we have been discussing. But the Biden White House, the same way that they throw a party to celebrate an inflation law that will only make inflation worse. They say it's inflation reduction. It's actually inflation. They also just defy reality and stare you right in the face and lie to you on the border. This was Karine Jean-Pierre. We were thinking about this clip before. Here she is telling everybody, not only are they doing a lot on the border, they are doing a lot more than Donald Trump was doing on the border.
Compare that to the Trump administration, which largely just tried to build a wall, an ineffective wall, along the border and couldn't even finish that in 4 years. We're certainly doing a lot more to secure the border and could be doing even more if Republicans would stop their obstruction.
Okay, I mean, my head is exploding. They stopped Trump from building the wall. They basically threw themselves in front of the earth movers and the equipment basic. I mean, they would have done anything.
They filed every lawsuit imaginable to stop the wall from being built.
The wall, where it was increased, improved, turned into a double fence, is highly effective. Everything she says here is just not true. Everything.
It was a bad day for the White House, celebrating 8.3% inflation and the worst day for the stock market since Joe Biden got into office. And then KJP shows up and says something that even Democrats are like, what is she talking about? You can criticize Donald Trump for a lot. The idea that he was getting the border, he was not being aggressive enough in protecting the border is maybe the one area that you have an awful argument at, even if you're an independent, Republican, or Democrat. And let's just mention this on the border for a minute, Buck. How is it that the Mexican cartel is better at controlling the Mexico border than our United States government is at controlling the United States government?
It's actually an important answer because it goes right to the heart of this. Incentives. The cartel is highly, highly incentivized to have a lockdown on the human trafficking and the drug smuggling, all the illegal. They're making billions and billions. what are the incentives on our side? For Democrats, the incentive is get as many illegals into the country as quickly as you can to change the long-term political reality of this country. They have argued this publicly, and the Biden White House makes it more likely than ever that you'll be able to stay if you come. So the incentives are show up now.
I think you're 100% right on that. And for all the Republican candidates out there listening and their staff, the border is a major issue. I think that the undersold part of the border issue is the cartel control of Mexico that is leading to them being coyotes, effectively making, as you said, billions of dollars to bring people across, but also the fact that they're preserving their control of the border so they can get as much fentanyl in as possible, which is killing over 100,000 Americans every single year.
One of our important functions here on the Clay and Buck Show is to remind you all of the truth and what people did when it mattered, and to make sure there are consequences for decisions made by those who are entrusted by the public with power in the House, the Senate, governors, you name it. And that's why we told you we'd be speaking about Joe Manchin, who decided to speak out in response to Kamala Harris saying the border is secure, which is, I mean, I don't know if there's a bigger lie that the Democrats, a more blatant, obvious lie that they've told in recent memory. I mean, because it's the worst border it's ever been. This would be like if the stock market had crashed 90% and they said the market's doing great. I mean, it's as bad as it could possibly be. Joe Manchin decided, oh, well, I'm going to break with Democrats on this one. Play 19.
Vice President Harris said this weekend the southern border is, quote, secure.
It's wrong. She's dead wrong on that. And I have said this. If we don't secure it, I voted every time for the wall. But we need the wall and a lot more. Technology, more agents. The 2013 immigration bill was still the best piece of legislation, I think, that we've ever had before us. We couldn't get it passed through the Republican House at that time because of some politics involved there, and the amnesty people were, shouting the word amnesty. That piece of legislation would have corrected everything we have going wrong. But for anybody, the vice president, anybody say that our borders are secured, that is not accurate. I've been there. It's wrong.
Okay, first of all, it was amnesty in 2013, which is why the whole thing fell apart. So he's wrong on that one. But Clay, I think Manchin realizes he needs to start stepping over toward the Republicans on a whole bunch of things, because why the heck is this guy the senator from West Virginia? West Virginia, this is your wake-up call. Get somebody else next time.
Here's my prediction. Joe Manchin failed utterly in backing down when it came to standing up to more money that Joe Biden wanted to spend. He was correct about inflation being out of control. He was right, thankfully, to oppose the $2 trillion or $3 trillion or whatever additional that Joe Biden wanted to spend. But he was wrong, and I think he knows it, to have eventually supported the $800 billion package that they just pushed through. He should have been ashamed to show up at the White House and support it. I think Joe Manchin hopes that Republicans win back the Senate. I really think he does. And then I think there's a decent possibility that if Joe Manchin wants to continue his political career, he may flip and become a Republican. That's my prediction for what he's going to do. Because if he's going to run as a Democrat in West Virginia in 2024, he's going to get destroyed. It's not going to be close. And I understand the powers of incumbency, and I understand West Virginia is a unique state, and Manchin's been there a long time. It's going to be a presidential election year. Trump may well be on the ballot. He's going to get utterly trounced and destroyed. So the only play he has, if he wants to maintain his political career, is to hope Republicans take control of the Senate, because he's not going to flip and change control of the Senate. Hope Republicans take control of the Senate, and then he's allowed to switch. Maybe he's an independent who caucuses with Republicans. I don't know exactly what he'll be. But he has 0% chance. Take it to the bank. 0% chance of winning re-election in 2024 in West Virginia as a Democrat.
I think he thinks he's going to just rewrite history, and people have short memories. And the fact that he's been able to represent West Virginia as long as he has should be shocking to anybody. So I think you're right in that he's
going
going
to take the show to West Virginia. If he tries to run as a Democrat again, we're not going to allow this to happen.
Yeah, it's crazy because when it really mattered, he's a Democrat, folks. That's right. This whole, I'm not one of those crazy Democrats. No, actually, you went along with a massive climate change bill at a time of super high inflation where West Virginians and all Americans are having a hard time paying for day-to-day necessities because of government spending and what it's doing to our monetary system. So he failed the test of sanity here and needs to be held to account for it.